Project Director at ACLU. Uh, what was I saying? I'm the Education Equity Project Director at the ACLU of Southern California. The ACLU is an organization that is committed to protecting civil rights and civil liberties in this country. And so here at the Southern California office, we cover 8 counties in Southern California, including LA County. And so I am going to share my screen. Hopefully this works. Audience window. All right. Did that work? Okay, awesome. So I'm going to share my screen, and I've been asked to come here tonight to share with all of you know your rights information for students who attend public schools. So Sandra sent out a survey to a lot of you, and you all completed it, kind of ranking what are the topics that you wanted to learn about, and there was a lot. I don't have time to cover everything in a 15-minute, in a 1-hour presentation. There were a lot of topics. So what I did is that I took the top topic in every category, and I'm going to cover those in a little bit more detail, give you, and then give you resources so that if you want to learn more about your rights about a topic that we cover tonight or a different topic, they will be on our website, myschoolmyrights.com. And then we'll give you my email so that if you want to contact me about a specific issue, you can. So My School, My Rights, what is it? It's, so, you know, in California, public school students do have the right to equal opportunity to access an education and the right to protect their education, their access to their education. And so a lot of students don't know what their rights are. A lot of families don't know what their rights are. And because of that, schools can take advantage and kind of violate their rights left and right. And so we, years ago at the ACLU, put together a website called My School, My Rights, where we're able to kind of put more information about what your rights are in different areas in schools, and then also list what you can do to protect your rights if your school violates your rights. And so on the website, we cover a variety of topics. I think we have over a dozen different topics that we cover, and those topics kind of fall into 6 different larger subjects. And so we cover your civil rights and your civil liberties in schools. We cover your health and your mental health rights in schools. We cover what to do if you get in trouble at your school, what your rights as a student are, your right to feel safe and be yourself at school, and how to enforce your rights. And so this evening, we're going to go into just one topic under each one of these subject areas, and some of them kind of cross over. So what we're going to start tonight is with your First Amendment rights in schools. So this is one of my favorite topics because often, you know, people try to tell me, educators try to tell me that students don't have free speech rights in schools or First Amendment rights in schools, and that's just false, right? Like, students do have rights in schools. There was a really famous case called the Tinker case that said, you know, I just got to hear from Mary Beth Tinker when she's now in her 70s, but when she was a middle school student, she and her brother wore black armbands just like around their arms to school in protest of the Vietnam War that was happening at the time. The school suspended her. I got to see the suspension notice, and the ACLU at the time represented her in a lawsuit that went up to the US Supreme Court and said that students actually do not lose their constitutional rights just because they're in schools. And in fact, the First Amendment and the US Constitution applies to students. And that's so important because that's the basis of a lot of rights that you have in school. So your First Amendment right? The First Amendment is your right to free speech, your right to practice, to express your religion, the freedom of the press, the freedom to assembly. And so a lot of those rights do exist in schools with some limitations, because the primary function of schools is to provide an education. And so you have the right of freedom of speech while at school, so you can express your beliefs and your ideas, but there are limitations. And so you can't do it in a way that disrupts the school or that infringes on the rights of others. So mainly what this means is, like, you can't stand up in the middle of your history class and interrupt the teacher to share something that you want to share, right? There's like a time and a place where you're able to do that. And usually it's before school, after school, during nutrition, lunch, or in between class time. And so you are able to also express your political opinion. So I open with the Tinker case because that case is about armbands. And to this day, we still get principals sometimes tell students that they can't wear leaflets or they can't wear a button like a pin about some kind of political issue that they're supporting. And so, you can pass out buttons, stickers, flyers to your peers with political messages or opinions, even if your school disagrees with your opinion, so long as the message isn't obscene, libelous, or slanderous, meaning that it's not truthful about the person that you're talking about. You cannot encourage others to break school rules or laws, and you can't harass others. So we saw this a lot during the uprisings a few years ago when students were trying to pass out buttons or pins saying like black, or wear shirts that said Black Lives Matter. Sometimes schools tried to censor them, and that's not allowed, right? It's a political message. It's also tied to someone's identity. And so for a number of reasons, schools should not have done that. So your political speech is protected when you wear your buttons, your badges, or kind of some other kind of insignia, including armbands or messages on t-shirts. You can post notices on school bulletins, you can distribute petitions, you can hand out printed materials like flyers or like little posters. You can write in public school newspapers and yearbooks, and you can write in like zines or something else that's considered an underground newspaper. You're also allowed to organize protests at your school so long as it's peaceful and orderly. So again, you can't do anything that interrupts a class time or someone else's learning, and you can't, break things or do anything else. It has to be peaceful. And one thing that we noticed during walkouts, especially during the Trump administration, students were planning walkouts, and then the schools were saying, well, if you walk out, we're going to suspend you or expel you. And that's actually not allowed, because when you engage in some kind of political speech, and that includes protests, and a walkout is a protest, your school can't punish you more harshly because you participated in some kind of protest on or off campus. So if the penalty for being truant for a day is detention and a letter home, then the same penalty applies for you engaging in your speech. So in other words, they can't discipline you more harshly for for exercising your rights, but they can still punish you. You also have the right under the First Amendment to pray at your school, so long as your prayer doesn't disrupt others or force them to participate. It also allows you to wear any kind of pendant or insignia or headgear, anything that's related to your faith. You're also able to do that at school. Even if your school has a dress code, they have to make exceptions. Any questions about this right so far? And sorry, I see there's a chat. I don't know if I can. Oh, no questions yet. Okay. Feel free to interrupt me if you have questions, or if I say something you're like, I don't know what that means. Totally cool for you to just to let me know. So if your First Amendment rights in schools is violated, like what can you do to protect your rights? And so we always encourage students that like the first place that you want to start is to review what your school's rules are about exercising your free speech. So if you want to distribute posters, or if you want to wear a political shirt, or you want to organize a protest, look at your school rules to see to kind of check to see what those rules are. And generally you want to avoid speech that's obscene, that's libelous or slanderous, that creates some kind of risk of students violating school rules or a law, and you can't disrupt the school. So there are exceptions, right? There are limitations to your right, and so long as you are kind of avoiding these like prohibitions or limitations, you should be in the clear. If a school administrator tries to censor your speech or tell you like, no, you can't wear that button, or no, you can't wear that pendant, or no, you can't talk to students about a protest that you're organizing, then there's certain things that you should do. And the first thing is you should always ask the principal, well, can you show me the policy in writing that you're using to tell me that I can't do what I'm doing? So the school's rules have to be written. You will be surprised that when you ask the principal for the written policy, oftentimes they'll just let it go and be like, all right, whatever, just do what you're gonna do, or just do it after school. Like they'll they'll give up because they don't want to give it to you, and half the time because they're making it up. They know that they can't do what they're trying to do. If they say, here's the policy and you still can't do it, you can also just show them there's parts of the California Education Code, and you can Google those real quick and say, look, the law says that I'm able to do this. So, you can't limit my speech in these ways because I'm not violating any of the rules around like, untruthful statements or being offensive or infringing on the rights of others. You can also get students to sign a petition. So if they try to ban your political speech in particular, you can organize and you can start a petition at your school and ask others to sign on to it, including organizations that work on the First Amendment, like the ACLU. And getting your history and government teachers, it's a really good exercise in civic engagement. And you should not also get in trouble for that. Petitions are allowed and they're used to create change all the time. You can write an article in the school paper. You can lobby at your school board meetings, and you can ask your parents or your classmates and other advocates to join you at the meeting and to also comment in support of your position and what you're trying to do. And then you can tell your local newspaper about what's happening at your school. Any questions about the First Amendment or free speech? Reactions? No. Okay. Feel free again to ping me if you have questions. All right, so we're going to move on to student mental health rights. So students do have some rights when it comes to protecting and safeguarding their mental health and wellness in schools. And one of the most important rights is relatively new. And so I want to make sure that you walk away knowing that you have the right to an excused absence if you miss school to support, improve, or benefit your mental or your behavioral health. So if you, for example, need to miss school because you have anxiety, or you're going through a really tough time at home with your family, and you need to go meet with your therapist or your psychologist, psychiatrist about what's happening, and you have to miss school time, that time is an absence from class or from the school day, depending on what's happening. But the absence has to be excused. I will say that we have received a lot of complaints from students that their schools don't know about this, that they haven't updated the policy to reflect the change in law. And if that's the case, it could just be really helpful for you to just tell the school, like, the law changed, here it is, Google it really quickly, or ask us what it is and we'll give it to you. It's in the education code. You also have the right to access any of the mental health supports that your school offers and to access them for free. And so, mental health support is really broad. It's defined really broadly, and it can include things like crisis intervention, counseling, individual or group therapy, assessment, and referrals to community-based organizations. School staff like counselors, social workers, and school psychologists and school nurses can provide these types of supports. They're credentialed. They have to get a credential from the state to do the job that they are doing. And to do those jobs, they get trained in all of these various aspects. And so they can also be resources for you for mental health support in your school. And again, if you access your school counselor, your social worker to talk about something that you're going through, those resources and their time to you is free. Cannot charge you for it. Sometimes schools also partner with community-based providers to support the mental health of students. Depending on the contract, it should be free, but sometimes they bring in outside parties and they charge, but they go through like Medi-Cal or through your insurance. But for the most part, your school should be offering you resources for free. You also have the right to request and review your school's comprehensive school safety plan. Sometimes those plans outline efforts to provide mental health or intervention services. So if you don't know what your school is doing in terms of intervention programs, Like let's say, for example, that you're being bullied and you don't know what your school offers you to protect you from bullying, you can ask, you can go to the main office and ask for the comprehensive school safety plan, and then you can review that. Oh, you have to request it in person. That's one of the few things that you can't request through something called a Public Records Act request. You also have the right to receive mental health instruction or education if your school provides you with a health class. So this is really important. So if your middle school or high school teaches a health class and you take it, then your school has to also teach you about topics about mental health. And so that includes things like mental health wellness, identifying signs and symptoms of mental health challenges like anxiety, depression, eating disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, and services that can help manage your mental health. These topics have to be covered in a way that is accurate, that's unbiased, that's appropriate and inclusive to all students, regardless of their race, gender, and sexual orientation. And if you're a student with a disability or you're an English learner, your school has to provide you with this education in a way that's accessible to you, to make sure that you can access it. So if you need it in Braille and the book is not in Braille, they have to be able to somehow accommodate your disability. And if you're an English learner and you're having trouble accessing the curriculum because you haven't mastered English yet, then the school has to accommodate that as well. The same goes for sex education, that if your school offers health classes, that they also have to provide you with comprehensive sex education that is unbiased and inclusive. And so that's under a law called the California Healthy Youth Act, that it's called CHIA. And so schools, there was a time, once upon a time, when education in schools was really biased and very heteronormative. And so now it has to be inclusive of our LGBTQ students as well, and communities as well. So those are some of the student mental health rights. And so how do you protect your rights? So one is by asking your teacher to teach about mental health in your health class if it's not already covered. So if you look at the curriculum for the class or the syllabus for your class, for your health class, and you don't see that mental health is covered or sex education, you can ask for that to be covered, and it's in the law. And if the teacher refuses, then you can raise a concern with the school principal or your elected representative on the school board. If you don't want to go directly to someone else on the campus, you can go outside of campus to your elected representative on your school board. You can also review your school or school district's policy on excused absences. So if mental health is not a reason that counts to excuse your absence, you can ask your school board member to change the policy to comply with the law, because it may not just be your school, it may be district-wide. And then also you can ask a trusted adult on your campus what's considered confidential or not when you talk to someone at school about what you're going through, and you can review a guide on what confidentiality laws cover when you speak to a counselor, social worker, or psychologist at school. Sometimes they'll have a guide, and if not, we have a guide on our linked on our website on My School, My Rights to another organization that just kind of tells you like what's confidential and what's not, because you do as a student, some things are confidential, but not everything. And your parent or your education rights holder has access to a lot of things, but where your safety is a concern, educators can keep things confidential if it means keeping you safe. Any questions about your mental health rights? Okay.
No, I just wanted to comment, Anna, that it's really good to know that schools have a responsibility to provide mental health information and the services. In that, I do have one question. I guess it's a bit of an overlap between the right to be absent, and an excuse absence, sorry. So students can go into therapy and schedule it during their class time, let's say, if like that's the only available time to meet with their therapist, that they can go ahead and do that and have the absence excuse.
Yes, because it's mental health related. So, if your therapist, for example, only works like 8 to noon, Monday to Friday, and that's the therapist that you're working with and you can't go anywhere else, those are school hours. You do have an obligation as a student to be in school during school hours, but if you need to miss school for like a doctor's appointment or your mental health, then you can be absent and it needs to be excused. Mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And again, I'll just reiterate that that is a law. The mental health reasons being excused absences is a newish law. And so a lot of schools haven't updated their policies. So I wouldn't be surprised if students run into issues, and we've already heard a lot about issues. Yeah. All right. So the next topic that we heard that we read that students wanted to learn about is your right to be free from bullying and harassment. And so you have the right to feel safe and affirmed at your school. Excuse me. So you do have the right to be free from discrimination. You have the right to be free from discrimination or harassment in schools based on who you are. And these identities are called protected characteristics. So I'm going to use that term a lot this evening because I want you to learn what that is, and so that you can also tell that to an administrator, because then they're going to know that like you know your rights. Protected characteristics include things like disability, gender identity, gender expression, nationality, which can cover immigration status, race or ethnicity, religion, and sexual orientation. So what this means is that my school cannot discriminate against me because of my disability or because of my gender or my gender identity or my gender expression, right? And so if your school, so you also have so that's one part. You also have the right to ask your school to protect you from harassment and bullying at school. So your school has what's called a duty to prevent harassment and a duty to prevent it from reoccurring once it's occurred. And so schools cannot allow discrimination or harassment to occur, including student to student harassment, once they learn about it. So for that reason, it's so important that if you are being bullied or harassed at your school, that you tell an administrator about it. So bullying is when a student causes another student to feel less safe, fearful, or like they're unable to participate in school. Bullying often involves some kind of imbalance of power, and it can include physical, verbal, or psychological actions against a student. And bullying can also happen through communications, including social media. And so that's called cyberbullying, when bullying occurs through like online, through like email, DMs, or text messaging. Harassment is also illegal, and you have the right to be free from harassment. And so harassment is when the speech or actions are so bad, or they're happening so constantly, that it bars or it limits your ability to get an education. It harms your well-being, or it interferes with your rights to your education, or it intimidates you. So bullying and harassment are both really harmful. And when it happens because of who you are, like because of your gender, your identity, or the color of your skin, or your gender, your school has to act on it because it's illegal for you to kind of endure or to live through a situation where that's constantly happening to you. So examples of potential violations related to discrimination and harassment on the basis of a protected characteristic are as follows. And I'll give examples. So for example, schools can't deny a trans student from using the bathroom that matches their gender identity. That would be discrimination based on gender identity. Schools do this often, but it's illegal to disproportionately discipline, or to more often discipline students of a particular background, like Black students, for behaviors that their peers don't get disciplined for. And then schools also cannot adopt policies that discriminate against one gender over another, and can't enforce them in ways that discriminate against one group of people. And so even when I went in person to the office last month, right, someone said that the school has a dress code, but it's only enforced against girls, right? So Because when girls show their shoulders, they get in trouble, but when boys show their shoulders, that's hard, they don't get in trouble. And so when only the girls get charged with violating the dress code and not the boys for doing the same thing, that means that there's a difference in treatment. And so the school is now violating the girls' rights. And that's not allowed. So how do you protect your right? So you start off by asking your school for the policies against discrimination and for any complaint forms or information about any complaint processes. So your school district has to have a policy about that says they're not going to discriminate, that they're not going to harass, and that discrimination and harassment will not happen in your schools. And some school districts may also have a policy specific on cyberbullying. So some of these policies have a matching kind of a friend or a companion policy called an administrative regulation. Both the board policy and the administrative regulation cover for that school district, cover your school. Your school district or your school may also have a parent-student handbook. You can review that for more information. Every year, your school must at least once send home information about the school's anti-discrimination policies and anti-harassment policies. So sometimes to meet that legal requirement, schools put that in the handbook that gets sent home like the first week of school that everyone signs off on that they read, but they don't actually read because it's like 60 pages, but that's in there. And so if you've kept that document, you should be able to find the policies. Your school also has, so one of those policies that they have to let you know about is about the uniform complaint procedures. And so that's a complaint process you can pursue if you face discrimination or harassment in schools. And I'm going to go more into that later in the presentation. You can also protect your right by contacting your school administrator to discuss what happened and to talk about how to stop the harassment or the discrimination. You can also demand that the school make a plan to address the bullying and the harassment and to include a timeline of next steps. The school has to take steps to stop harassment and bullying. So if you tell them that you're being bullied because you're a girl, or you're being bullied because you're queer, or you're being bullied because you're Native, that's illegal, and the school has to take steps. They can't just brush it off and say, we're not going to do anything about it. If they do that, that's illegal. You need to you can contact an attorney to help you enforce your rights, or you can do more of what's on here to enforce your rights. You don't need an attorney to file complaints, these types of complaints. So there's two types of complaints that you can file if you are facing discrimination or harassment in schools. One is the uniform complaint procedures. And so that's a complaint that's, it's a written and signed statement by you, an organization like Native Voice of College or anyone else that alleges that the school is violating a law in school. You can also file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights. It's called an OCR complaint. The Office of Civil Rights in the U.S. Department of Education is a federal agency. So now this is outside of California because it's federal. So it's nationwide and it covers California. And so the OCR office investigates complaints of discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, disability, and age in public schools. Any questions about discrimination or harassment rights in schools, or your right to be safe and affirmed in schools?
I have a question, Anna. Because you mentioned about the bathrooms. Because I recently learned something about when bathrooms need to become gender neutral at the workplace. But do you know I'm wondering, do you know any information at like the school setting? Like, what is that? Like, when do bathrooms need to become gender neutral, or if that is something that even exists for schools?
Let me get back to you on that. Let me make a note because the law is a little bit different in schools.
Mm.
Give me 1 second. actually, it might be on our website, but because I don't remember off the top of my head and I don't want to get confused, but there's two things. One, school students have the right to use the bathroom that matches their gender identity. But if they want to go, if they want access to a different bathroom or a private bathroom or quote unquote gender neutral bathroom, I think that's the piece where I'm missing. But I think there was an effort to make sure that schools provided at least one bathroom that was gender neutral, but I'm not sure if that law went into if it passed and went into effect. And so I'll double check for you and get back to you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So we did this presentation last month with the seniors, but I think if not all of you are seniors and you weren't at the presentation last month. So I'm going to just cover student dress at graduation. Very briefly, that we can spend a whole hour on this topic or any of the other ones. So this is the very quick version of that presentation. But in general, you have the right to wear tribal regalia or religious or cultural items at graduation. Under the U.S. Constitution and state laws, you also have the right to religious expression and freedom of expression as a student. In California, K-12 students can wear, quote, traditional tribal regalia or recognize objects of religious or cultural significance as an adornment at school graduation ceremonies, where an adornment is something that's worn, attached to the cap and gown, or other graduation clothing required by your school. Schools can only limit this right if they can prove that the item that you want to wear is likely to cause a substantial disruption or material interference with the graduation ceremony. This is rare. Schools often allow students to graduate wearing sashes for different academic programs or medals or pendants tied to academic programs or even sometimes extracurricular clubs. And so if that's the case, then they would have a very hard time proving that students wearing their regalia or wearing adornments would also disrupt the graduation ceremony. That's just, so it would be very rare for them to be able to limit that right. And in most cases, we don't think they can. So how do you protect your right? So you protect your right, always go back to the school policies. I think that's been the case with every one of the sections that we've talked about tonight. Pay attention to announcements about graduation and dress codes on social media or any senior packets that they send home or commencement packets that they send home if you're in 8th grade. If you're unsure about whether your school allows you to wear tribal, religious, or cultural items that you want to wear, just ask your graduation coordinator. And if your school says that you can't wear the items that you want to wear, then you need to advocate for yourself so that you can make sure that you can walk at graduation with your right. Oftentimes we find that one email to the school with the information that we even supplied to you, it's on our website. If you use our toolkit, usually that solves the problem. There are a few school districts that refused after, students or families wrote one email. And for those school districts, you can reach out to us if you have any issues. So the first place after you find out what the rules are, you get the information, is that you can write a letter or an email to your school principal and your school board member or the entire school board if you want, to say that you want to wear your items at graduation and ask them to remove barriers for you to do so. We have a sample letter for you to use. We have a tribal regalia advocacy toolkit with a lot of information. It's a Google Drive folder. And so you'll see here that we have information on how you can create your own social media posts, the Know Your Rights guide and the law, letter templates that you can send to your school to advocate for your right, and social media posts that we've already put up. And so you can find it at bit.ly/regalia resources, or you can scan the QR code to get to the drive, and you can use those materials to protect your right. Any questions on this? Very, very quick summary. All right.
And really quick, we have two seniors in the room, in the virtual room. And I want to just give them a shout out for, working so diligently on their caps, beating their cap, and also their parents who have come in and supported as well. So our seniors are working on it. So we're really proud of them.
Awesome. So I think those are the topics that I was going to go in deeply on, but I did want to flag 10 other rights that students should know. So one, and I've mentioned some of these before, so I'm going to fly through these. So one is students have the right to use the facilities that best match your gender identity. Two, you have the right to a K-12 public education as an undocumented student. Three, you have the right to keep the contents of your phone, your laptop, or tablet private if it's your own device. So I just had this happen with one of our students where he was on his phone during class, and he shouldn't have been. So the teacher took it from him and said, unlock your phone because I want to look at what you're looking at. And, at the time he said yes, but then we asked him, was like, could you have said no? And he said, well, I didn't want to get in trouble. So I said yes in the moment. But the rule is that if it's your private property, your private electronic device, the government can't search through it without your consent or without a warrant. And so, if teachers take away your phone because you're on it when you're not supposed to, that's okay. But once they ask you to unlock it or go through it, that's not okay. You need to give your consent, or your parent, if it's their phone, they have to give their consent. Four, you have the right to refuse to be searched, though your school can still search you if staff have what's called a reasonable suspicion that searching you will turn up evidence that you violated a school rule or a law. Or two, if the staff are conducting a truly random search. In LA Unified, they were using random searches in illegal ways. And so random means random. So if your school is doing a search that's a random search, they have to be able to show how it's random. So if they say we rolled a dice and the die said that we are going to landed on 4, we're going to search every 4th student, that would be random. But choosing students that look a particular way, for example, or that they're trying to bust a specific student, you can't use random searches for that. 5, you have the right to wear clothing or hairstyles consistent with your race, your ethnicity, or religion, and dress in a way that aligns with your gender identity. I mean, you might have read in the news of several examples of schools cutting Native students' hair or Black students' locks because of whatever reason. They're not actually allowed. One, they're not allowed to do that for several reasons, but in particular because you have the right to do those things. They shouldn't be cutting your hair. You also have the right to stay in the same school while you're pregnant or parenting. So we do have a Know Your Rights guide for pregnant and parenting students. You have the right to challenge a suspension or expulsion and tell your side of the story. So many students get disciplined and they just go with it, not knowing that they have rights and they can challenge it. And get it on. Sometimes the school has to undo the suspension or the expulsion and make sure that they can make up all their homework. You have the right to a comprehensive and inclusive sex education at least once in middle school and once in high school. You have the right to access reproductive and sexual health services during school hours on a confidential basis. And you have the right to stay in the same school if you move to a new foster placement or are experiencing houselessness. This came up a lot during the pandemic, especially when families were losing their homes or their ability and were getting evicted, usually illegally. They had to move to a relative's house or move into a motel that was outside the district boundaries. The district found out and then said, you can't come here anymore, you're going to get booted. That's actually not allowed because when you lose your home and you're a student experiencing houselessness, you're able to stay in your home school, in your home school district, even if you are residing somewhere outside of the boundaries. Schools violate that right, left and right, and it's really unfortunate. So if your rights have been violated, what can you do? So, you know, visit myschoolmyrights.com. We have a lot of information there about your rights. We recently published in the past few weeks an education complaint guide to help you figure out what types of complaints you can file depending on the issue that you're seeing in school. And so that's on our website under our resources tab for My School, My Rights. You can also submit a request for the ACLU's assistance online. We have a legal intake process. Just a disclaimer that we don't take every case and every intake that we get, because we get thousands of them and we just cannot respond to every single intake. But we do encourage people to submit them, because if we can respond, we'd like to. We also encourage folks to keep all the records related to the incident that gave rise to the violation. So keep copies of your email, any photos, any videos. If it's something related to your school and it's in your school email, forward it to yourself, to like your personal Gmail account or whatever, wherever your personal email address is. I just had a situation actually with a relative who got illegally expelled from school, and before he knew that, they cut off. By the time we realized that they were expelling him, they had already cut off his email, and so we didn't have access to any of the emails between him and his teacher before the expulsion happened and before they cut off emails. So, you know, whether it's in schools and at your job in the future, just make sure that you're always saving a copy of the email somewhere else and not on your school email address account. You can always send advocacy letters to your school principal, to your school board member, and get your peers to sign on to petitions. You can also do public comment and mobilize people to show up at a school board meeting. They're open meetings, they're open to the public. And then you can file a uniform complaint procedure if that applies to your situation. So uniform complaint procedures, we do have a guide on how to file these on the website, but just breaking it down into kind of 3.5 steps. These are the complaints that you can file if you experience harassment or discrimination in schools. You can also file a UCP complaint if your school violates another state or federal law. Your school district's rules and policy on anti-discrimination or the UCP form will tell you what programs and issues are covered by the UCP process outside of discrimination and harassment. Like migrant education is covered, parenting, lactating accommodations are covered, a variety of different topics are covered. So the UCP process is expansive, but for purposes of today, we're going to focus on bullying and harassment. If your school district has a complaint form, you use that. But you can also write a letter and be sure to include all of the necessary details about what happened in your complaint. Again, the complaint has to be signed by you or someone at the organization. It can also be filed anonymously. So once you find your school district's policies and the complaint form, you know, kind of educate yourself on what the process is. Then step 2 is to fill out the form or write the letter and be as detailed as possible. Include details about what happened, when, where, who was involved, and who was a witness, and which school or school district staff you talked to about the incident. Be clear to indicate whether you face discrimination or harassment and on what protected characteristics. So that list that we talked about earlier. Attach any documents or evidence to support your complaint. So step 3A and 3B go hand in hand. So step 3 is broken up into 2 pieces. So then you turn in the complaint form directly to the principal or the superintendent of the school district. Be sure to follow your district's rules on who receives the form and also on the timeline for the form. UCP complaints have to be filed within a certain amount of time after the incident. So I believe it's, I can't remember if it's 180 days or 6 months, but it's on our website. But you have to file the complaint within that window. Someone just talked to me about something that happened to them 3 years ago that that you can no longer file a complaint about something that happened 3 years ago. There's a window of time by which you have to file the complaint. And all the rules vary. So forgive me that I didn't put in a presentation, but it's on our website. And then once you file the complaint, step 3B is to keep a copy of the complaint you submitted. Again, if you submitted it using your school email address or your work email address, if you're a parent, print it out or forward it to, and keep a copy at home or forward it to yourself. I can't tell you how many times I've had people submit complaints and lose access to the complaint. So there's no record that it was submitted because they lost access to their school or work account. If you want to know more information, because we're coming up on the 45-minute mark, if you want to know more information, again, we have a toolkit for you to advocate for your tribal regalia at graduation rights. You can go to the bit.ly link is there, bit.ly regalia resources. If your school gives you issues about wearing your regalia at graduation or any of your adornments that are cultural or religious based, email graduation@aclunc.org to share your story or to request support. That email goes to folks at goes to me and then to my colleagues in Northern California, so that if I'm out, they get it, and if they're out, I get it. Someone will respond. If you have any additional questions, just for all of you that attend tonight, I can make myself available. So my email address is listed at the bottom. It's amendoza@aclusocal.org. But again, if you have an intake, I encourage you to process it through our intake process and the link that I shared earlier. So with that, thanks for joining, and just a reminder to visit myschoolmyrights.com if you're ever in doubt about what your rights are and you want to learn more. So thank you very much.